Samupe, Sampa Bietia, Chimothy non Kotu, Era One Radio. Samupe, Jumpa Bietia, Chimothy non Kotu, Era One Radio. Oh, and Yumpantuma, Asam Pantuma.
Good evening, Era One Radio listeners. It's another Thursday, and of course, that means it's the Divine Connection. I'm your host, Charles Boison, and I have my seasoned men of God, pastors, ITs, physicists, call it whatever they are, they there, and they have everything, jack of all trades and master of all. I have Reverend Robert Akrong in the studio, and I have Uncle Max also in the studio. And gentlemen, you are welcome to another edition of Divine Connection.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. All right, Uncle Max. All right, you're welcome. Well, it's another edition. We are broadcasting live on Facebook, YouTube, and Modern Ghana Radio. Please, we encourage you to call in 2402-802-633, and texting is 5109-310-946. 5109-310-946. All right, tonight we are continuing with our reflection. Tonight we are looking at the inductive and deductive reasoning. Actually, we're going to still focus on the reflection on God-grown trees. We've been looking at what happened in the garden, the kind of trees that were planted, what Adam and Eve were allowed to eat and what they were not, how the serpent came and deceived the woman first, and there was a whole lot of deception going on. And I think last week we left off with Genesis chapter 3, verse 1. I want us to just go back a little before we continue. Of course, we always start with our trending issues. But then tonight, we don't want to take too much time. I mean, normally our warm-ups can take a reasonable, sizable time. So we'll skip that tonight. But I mean, we have hot topics. I mean, we're going to talk about the temperature of Ghana politics, even as we have about 9 days to the show me down election of 4th November. We also have a new speaker. Finally, after 3 weeks, we have a new speaker in the House. And there's still shootings going on in this country. 18 already dead. They're still chasing this guy who did it. And Israel and Hamas are still fighting. Of course, I don't know what Russia and Ukraine are doing. It's like nothing is going on there. Anyway, we're going to go into our study. Gentlemen, any greetings, any preambles before we start?
On my end, it's quiet.
That's good.
And that's a good thing.
Quiet is good.
So I have nothing to report here. Over to you, Uncle Max.
Uncle Max, what is burning in your ghetto?
Well, I suppose one of the key things that's going on in Accra is the burial of the Manye, which has stirred up a bit of controversy. In Ghana, we take burials very seriously, especially of royalty.
I think today your vocal is a little bit.
Okay, so I'll try and speak up. Is that better?
Yeah, it's like we are coming from afar.
Right.
I mean, yeah, we are listening. Go ahead. Yeah, I was just making you aware that it's like your voice is coming from afar.
Yeah. The key thing is about Accra is threatening to be a knockdown from tomorrow for a couple of days because of the burial of one of the Ghana royals and part of one family group went to courts to seek an injunction against it. We're not quite clear why, but it will happen anyway because the judge's ruling was that nothing should be done with the remains of the deceased. So I think the plan is to go ahead with these various ceremonies and rituals, but without the body. Such is our fixation with the afterlife in Ghana today. So it's very topical, seeing as we're talking about Adam and Eve eating of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, when they had been told that they would surely die if they did so. So we are witnessing some of the facts from that decision so many thousands of years ago.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you for the updates. Yeah. It's like, you know.
So
All right. So let's pick up from there, and I'm going to read Genesis chapter 3 verse 1, and then we'll pick up the nuggets from there, and then take whatever we have to do, because like I said, that's where we were getting off. Starting from there, that's when the heat ended. So we'll pick up from there, and then we'll continue with what we have to discuss today. So Genesis chapter 3 verse 1, this is how it goes. It said, now the serpent was more cunning than any beast of the field which the Lord God had made. And he said to the woman, has God indeed said, you shall not eat of every tree of the garden? Uncle Max, what would you say is the strategy that the serpent used against Eve in this first verse of chapter 3?
I think he was trying to find out how accurate her understanding was of the commandments that had been handed to Adam. So a command was given to Adam. Presumably Adam shared it with Eve, and Eve put her own spin on it. In this process, we know of as Chinese whispers, where a message goes in one, and by the time it comes out of the other end of the chain of people transmitting the supposedly same message from one to another, by the time it comes out of the other end, the thing is very different from what went in the first place. So misunderstandings and misconstructions can go on in human communications, and perhaps the devil was aware of this and sought to establish how far off the straight and narrow Eve was in her understanding of the commandments that have been given to her. So if you demonstrate you don't fully understand what's going on, then it makes you vulnerable to manipulation and misdirection, which I think is what happened here.
Oh, okay. Wow, profound. Thank you very much. Saba, do you want to add to it, or just give us your perspective on that?
Yeah, Dr. Boison, one of the what we call very important skill a writer brings to his craft is what we call the text structure. Text structure, we have 6 main text structures. We have description, we have time order, we have problem and solution, we have cause and effect, we have compare and contrast, and so on and so forth. We also have what we call the 5 narrative modes. Again, description features in it. You have action, you have thought, you have exposition. And when you take the two together, the text structure, one that is prominent, or you take both as sets, one that is common to them is description. And description, interestingly, taps into our powers of creativity. Because immediately as description of something is given, for most people, the mind begins to paint pictures of that object. So you come to verse 3 and you want to apply what narrative mode the author has adopted here. You realize that this is dialogue.
Okay.
Dialogue has an interesting feature. Whenever an author uses dialogue in his writing, all that he is doing is that he, the author, he is taking himself out of the picture and giving you access to the minds of the characters themselves, and therefore will leave the judgment of the individual characters to the reader. So you come here and again you have the description first given. The author tells us that the beast, the serpent here, was the most subtle of all the beasts that God created. And look at the interesting way the author went about it. Now the serpent was more subtle than any beast of the field, which the Lord God, not just God, not just Lord, Lord God, Jehovah Adonai, had made. And he said unto the woman, yea, have God said, ye shall not eat of every tree of the garden. So immediately we see the serpent and the woman, with the serpent initiating this dialogue with a question that was loaded. And that's where the subtlety sets in. If you analyze the question he asks, say, has God said, ye shall not eat of every tree of the garden? It was as if to paint a picture of God as one wicked individual. I mean, if the question is, has God said you should not eat of any tree of the garden, then the question is, what should you eat? Did God create you to starve you? Are you getting me? And then that opened the floodgates of errors to follow. Again, as I said, this is a dialogue. So what the author is doing here is taking himself out of the picture and giving us the two characters, at least, involved in this dialogue. So now we have a subtle question. A subtle question. Has God said you shall not eat of every tree of the garden? The question to ask is, how did he know? How did he know what God had told Adam and Eve? Did God tell him also? And if God asked him not to do something, has he broken? Or at this point, had he broken a commandment of the Lord? We don't know. But these are valid questions we could ask. Where was he coming from? And Dr. Boison, another feature. Here we have the serpent speaking to human beings. So what are we to deduce or extract out of this? Was there a time when animals or certain animals could speak like humans or could communicate?
Dr. Doolittle.
Or the other way around, was there a time when humans could communicate directly with animals? But whatever it is, this is what the author has given us. You get me? So we are presented with two intelligent beings. Whoa. That sets a certain stage. That sets a certain stage. Question: the God that created both of us, is he so wicked as to ask you not to eat of everything, every tree in the garden? And then Eve answers. So with that, we can do this analysis and ask ourselves, what is the mind of the serpent at this point? How does subtlety ensue out of what he said? That's where the analysis should begin. You get me? He could have asked, what did God ask you not to eat? You get me? But he asked a general question. Did God ask you not? So it was a question loaded with information already. That's a very interesting way. He wasn't looking for information. He was looking for an opportunity to provide information himself. That's the subtle point here. Because, Dr. Boison, let's ask ourselves, if I find myself in a neutral container, my first instinct will be to check what are the details of that environment. I don't go actually making definite statements about the container. It means that if I start asking definite questions of the container with features that are there, it means that I have prior information.
Mm-hmm.
So straight away, the author is setting us up here with the way this conversation has been structured. The content of it sets us up that, listen, you are going to see some intelligent discussion flowing out of the minds of these characters. Pay attention, because you've already been given that prior information about this one of these characters, that he is subtle, which means he hides his intent beneath the surface.
Mm. Yeah, that is why I think last week I mentioned and I brought up this idea of the fact that it looks as if the devil, I'm sorry, I don't know, I keep saying the devil, the serpent had some kind of prior knowledge. That is why, in my own opinion, I don't think the first time the serpent met Eve was when he came to, whether it was a he snake serpent or a she snake, we don't know gender of the snake. But the first time the snake approached Eve, I am thinking there must have been maybe a prior discussion. Even if it wasn't, it could have meant that the serpent had been studying Adam and Eve, seriously, to know where he was going to approach them. And this brings to mind just what you said about what the enemy will use. And I think I've mentioned on this platform before about doing a SWOT analysis, even if you are in business. This scripture also lends some knowledge to even business people. If you are doing business, you have to know your SWOT analysis, your strengths, your weakness, your opportunities, and the threats. Your opponent or your competitor would like to even study your modus operandum so they can use it against you. For instance, somebody, if you are all selling maybe towels or sponge or takucha or whatever it is, your competitor can just, maybe send somebody just to come and spy the way you are doing business. In this case, the serpent approached this woman and started, you mentioned conversation. I don't know whether it was a pure conversation. It's like the devil came to dominate. The serpent came to dominate the conversation because he pulled the woman from a corner that the woman didn't have any, thing to defend herself with, because has God told you not to? She didn't even start with a regular, oh, hello, madam, how are you doing? How was your day? He just gashed in. So, Uncle Max, I want you to come and help me out here. Again, on the strategy. How do you think the serpent used, and how should this relate to our common approach to life? Because like the conversation that enemy started with was kind of serious, and we have to be very watchful. We have to be very, very watchful. Otherwise, we'll be outwitted, even in the age where there's so much scamming going on.
Yeah. I think the lesson from this particular, or one of the lessons from this particular encounter, is to be very analytical when it comes to questions that are asked of us. You know, the way you control a conversation is not what you say, it's what you ask. Because that is what directs the mind of your opposite party that you are conversing with. That's what directs your mind down the particular routes you want them to go. Now, I'm reminded, just to backtrack a little bit, on the question of whether to talk to men or whether men could talk to serpents. I'm reminded that not too long ago, we were studying the temptation of Christ. And the point was made that this was the second major temptation of man, of mankind. Christ as God incarnate was the second, and the first was the temptation of Adam and Eve. And if we are therefore talking about the devil, then we must also accommodate the idea, the possibility that the devil was merely using the serpent as his conduit. So, in the same way that, you have spirits that occupy, that become incarnate, occupy bodies, and so on. We are aware of the phenomenon of possession, where a spirit can take over a body, even if one can't fly. And I should maybe consider that perhaps this was actually the devil speaking, speaking through the serpent. Yeah. So the principality we are dealing with, even though the serpent is described as a most subtle beast, maybe it was that subtlety that opened him up to possession by the devil to be used as a tool of the devil. So that's a bit of an aside, something to ponder. But coming back to the question of the strategy of the serpent stroke devil, here's somebody who's asking what appears to be a very innocent question, but the effect of the question is to focus Eve's mind on what it is that she has been asked not to eat. Yeah. The question is phrased in such a way, it doesn't focus her mind on all the other trees that she is allowed to eat. But because there was a negative spin to the question, has he said you should not eat of every tree? Her mind automatically goes to the two trees or the one tree, two trees in the middle of the garden, the one tree that they have been asked not to eat. So this is your devil preparing the ground, directing Eve's mind in a certain way so that she becomes open to discussing this forbidden tree. Yeah? And without her even realizing it, she's drawn down that path and she's being misled by the information that the devil gives her, because she is now thinking of this forbidden tree, but he can talk about the tree of life, okay? But in this context, Eve thinks he's talking about the forbidden tree of the knowledge of good and evil. So he can tell an apparent truth, but in the context of in which he is making that statement, it is misdirection, it is misleading. Because Eve's mind is on this forbidden tree, not on the other tree in the middle of the garden, being that tree of life.
Oh.
And I think this is where the subtlety of the misdirection, or what we might today call disinformation, comes in. We appear to be talking about one thing when in actuality we are talking about something completely different. And that happens a lot in the disinformation uh, media on our social media today.
All right. Thank you, Sam. Well noted. Yeah, that is very elaborate. Thank you very much. So you realize that scamming, as we see and experience nowadays, did not even just begin today. And Solomon said in his books that there is nothing new under the sun. So the scamming that we see nowadays, right now, started long time ago. And even in the garden, that is where scamming began. The serpent went to the woman and started scamming her. They didn't have telephone. This was a direct message, direct me and you talk conversation that they had. In this case, anybody can call on the phone and give you street talk. Oh, if you do this, you get this, and scamming is all over. So we got to be careful. That is why treating this topic is not just like doing a Sunday study where we are just looking at what happened in Genesis. This has a very profound and a contemporary message for us. We want to know the strategy that the devil used. That is why we are taking time to look at the serpent's proposition. Because, like I said earlier on last week, when people are trained in money, they show them both the right currency and the counterfeit. You have to know both. And maybe they start with the right one. Know the actual one first. When you know the true identity of the right currency, then when you see a counterfeit, you will see. So they have to know both. That is why we need to know the serpent strategy, so that when he is coming to us, we know what we have to do in his approach. So, Nisam, I want you to walk us through the serpent's proposition, because the serpent said that God was trying to say that if you eat the tree or the fruit, your eyes are going to open and all that, they're not going to die. But you realize that when they ate the fruit, their eyes actually did open. But did they die instantly? They did not die. And Nisaba will confirm that. Uncle Mas also knows that after 930 years, that is when they dug the grave and put Adam in. 930 years after this conversation took place, that the day you eat, you will die. Which means, I believe God's 1,000 years is actually a day, and a day is 1,000 years. The serpent opening of the eyes was materialized at that very moment when the couple ate it. But the dying aspect, the death did not come in. So, Nisama, please walk us through the proposition of the enemy, so we'll know how we can put our feet where when we see it coming.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Boison.
You're welcome.
Okay, the serpent was subtle. Subtle. What was the motivation? As of verse 1, we don't know why, but we will learn down the line. And then verse 2, the woman speaks. Mind you, I said, this is a writing technique of getting the reader to really assimilate, literally eat the text. The author uses these tricks to draw you into the text deeply. The woman answers and said, God said we may eat of the fruit of the trees of the garden, but of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, God hath said, ye shall not eat of it, neither shall ye touch it, lest you die. Dr. Boison, very interesting. Again, last week, we touched briefly on this. And to really do justice to this text, right, and maybe set the stage for subsequent sessions, Dr. Boison and Uncle Max, I want to introduce sets the mathematics of, the mathematical field of set theory into this, right? So we'll be focused in our analysis. Dr. Boison, we have a term in set we call the domain of discourse. And with the domain of discourse, what you do is to look at all the elements in that set. The domain of discourse is a set. And so when you set the domain of discourse, the set of the discourse, you are saying that all that I'm going to say, the elements that constitute call it the substance of my speech or presentation is to be found or are to be found in this set. So what I will first do is to set up the set, the domain of discourse. So Dr. Boison, if we go back to Genesis chapter 2, verse 9, and then verse 16 and 17, we will see that we have trees, right? All kinds of trees. Then we have specific trees, the tree of life, the trees that were pleasant to the sight, trees that were good for food. So let's count. You have all sets of trees. That's one set of trees, so all trees. And then you have specific trees like the tree of life, that will make it 2. You have the trees of knowledge, that will knowledge of good, that will be 3. Knowledge of evil, that will be 4. You have the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, that will be 5. You have the tree of life, that will be 6. And then, which again, I think that will be the set of trees, right? But Dr. Boison, there is an interesting thing. We have Adam and Eve there. So that takes us to 9 elements. And then we also have God. That is 10 elements. And then you have the serpent. That is the 11th. So Dr. Boison, right out of the gate, what the author is saying, if we do our power cardinality as we are used to, you go to 2 raised to the power 11. That takes you to 2048. These are the number of possible combinations of thought elements that you can deal with in this particular story. Maybe most likely more. I've just given you just a summary, right? Some of the elements, the combination of them, and what we can glean from either dealing with one or the combinations. I got 2 raised to the power 11 because I have 11 elements in the set called the domain of discourse. So Dr. Boison, as a way to approach this very test we are dealing with, let's call this dialogue, right? Well, let's give you the title, the dialogue in the garden, okay. Right? So that is what we will call our predicate. And it involves 2 elements, the devil, the serpent, and Eve at this time. So again, what are we trying to see? Listeners, whenever you have something like this, a test like this, try to do as I've laid out. Try to create your set of elements in that, call it skit, call it story, whatever. And just create the understanding that that's what everything is going to be built on or out of. So when you look at dialogue, the name itself, it involves more than one party. But here, you have what we call an ordered pair. The ordered pair here is Eve and
The serpent.
So your first thing, this conversation or this dialogue is going to be true as a proposition if both elements are to be found in your set. Yes, if you check our set that we built, which is we call the domain of discourse, you have Eve there and you have the serpent there. So that becomes a valid sort of conversation, right? But Dr. Boison, as we go down and we start adding elements, then we will realize that there is a problem. And first thing, if we start dealing with the first set that we've dealt with, you realize that the answer of the woman, of Eve, when she introduced fruit is not part of it's not a member, or it's not an element of the domain of discourse we built, because that is based on what God gave us. Fruit is not there. So that is your first clue that this whole conversation as a proposition is false. That's your first. The second thing is that we go there, Eve again says, God said we cannot touch. You go into your domain of discourse set, touch is not there. It's not one of the descriptions given any of the elements. So Eve introduced the question of touch. So you know right out of the gate that again renders this proposition false, because that element, and for that matter, that proposition is not based on the set of elements we call the domain of discourse. That's the second thing. Then the third thing we come, right? We see Eve actually expanding whatever God had said and then contracting whatever God had said at the same time. Look at the picture. She said, God said we may eat of the fruit, which actually contracts. It contracts what the extent or the range of things God said they could do. God said, you may eat of the trees. A tree has more than fruit. God said you could eat. When she said fruit, she contracted, right? She limited the range, right? And then the next thing she says is, but of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, God has said, ye shall not eat of it. Okay, now we've established that fact. The whole argument of Eve is a false proposition that knocks everything she says down. Now let's look at what the serpent then says. Dr. Boison?
Yes, sir.
The serpent says, you shall not surely die. Meanwhile, Eve created an ambiguity, as my learned scholar, Uncle Max, just told us, right? God said, if you eat of this, you shall surely die. In the day you eat of it, you shall surely die. The serpent says, you shall not surely die. That is a direct contradiction.
Yeah, attack on God's word, huh?
So, Dr. Boison, let's pause. Verse 1 makes us to understand that the serpent was created by God. So, between the creator and the creature, who is to be believed?
Of course, the creator.
That's what the author is actually trying to put in our plate too. Isaiah will put it somewhere. Who has believed that report, or whose report would you believe? Would you believe the report of God, or you will repeat that you believe the report of man, and in this case, the report of a serpent against the report of God? So that was direct contradiction, right? Dr. Boison, what we'll do is now shift gears. So all of a sudden, we have death introduced into the mix, and then we have non-death introduced into the mist. Until this time, these two elements were not there. I purposely didn't ask the issue of death in my domain of discourse. That's it. I'm introducing it now because the devil now expands the set. So we put death as an element there. And so when we take the discourse or the dialogue here, we have to move from just ordered pair to now ordered triplets. We have Adam, we have Eve, now we have the serpent, and now we have the question of death. Right.
Before you continue, let me ask Uncle Max a quick question that is burning. I mean, somebody asked me, Uncle Max, so here, later on, the scripture tells us that after Eve had eaten the tree or the fruit, she gave some to her husband, Adam. And many are asking, was Adam right there in the garden when the discourse was going on between the serpent and Eve, or he had gone into the bush chasing after grass cutters or naming plants or something? Was he there in the garden when this thing was going on? I know Nisaba might have the answer, but Uncle Mas, let me come to you real quick.
I don't think it's easy to tell from the text where Adam was at the time of this exchange. He was probably nearby because in verse 6, it talks about the woman eating of the tree, seeing it was good for food and pleasant to the eyes. And when she took of the fruit, she then gave also unto her husband. Now, I imagine if he was very close by, he may have intervened to correct Eve's answer to the serpent. Yeah, his failure to do that suggests he wasn't within hearing.
Within the vicinity. Oh, okay. All right.
At the time.
Thank you.
But Dr. Boison, I would like to point out again that when the serpent asked Adam of the trees of which she may not eat, as it were, she made reference to the tree in the middle of the garden. Now, the previous chapter talks about two trees. Mm-hmm. The tree of life, which was in the middle of the garden, and also the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. So one presumes that the tree of the knowledge of good and evil was also in the garden, alongside the middle of the garden, alongside the tree of life. But when Eve responds to the serpent, she talks of the tree in the middle of the garden. Yeah, which is the tree of life. And certainly one would imagine if she were to partake of the tree of life, she would not die. So there appears to be confusion in Eve's mind between the tree of life and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, which she has been forbidden to eat.
I wonder what the respective colors were, whether one was Odum type or the other was Wawa type, or we don't know the difference. Just whether one was a little bit brownish in color or greenish, we have no idea. All we know is both of them were in the midst of the garden, and they have names. But anyway, thank you. Thank you, Uncle Mark. I think you made a point very clear over there. Nisaba, do you want to continue from there? I know we have so much information too.
Dr. Boise, I mean, again, the devil, the serpent, directly contradicts God. Said, you shall not surely die. But Dr. Boise, the next thing he did was to present an argument. And what is our clue? Said, for God doth know, that sets us the reason. So again, you go back, you try to formulate your argument form here, right? Whenever you see 4, we call it an argument marker, right? And 4 actually identifies the premise, which will make you shall not surely die the conclusion of whatever the serpent was trying to say. So let's arrange the argument the serpent presented in its proper form. These are the premises the serpent gave.
Before you do, let me read our brother Prince Abraham's assertion real quick. Maybe that will line to what, or if you can even read. He said, it's obvious the serpent lured Eve away from Adam. I'm thinking so because the serpent showed up when Eve came into being. Adam was around all this while, but nothing was said of the serpent until Eve showed up.
That's a good observation. That's a good one. That's a really good one. Uncle Mas, what do you say? I think that's a very good one.
Yeah.
Well, it's a thought. I'm reminded of the story of the gentleman who was talking to his girlfriend. And he says, oh, honey, when I lost my job, you were there for me. When my mother died, you were there. When I had my accident, you were there. And the lady says, of course, honey, I'm there for you. I'm for you all the time. And he says, no, I think you're bad luck.
Say that again.
He says, no, I think your being there is bad luck for me. You're going
So you better not be there, huh? he wouldn't have gone through all that if the lady wasn't around. Wow.
Exactly.
Okay. So Dr. Boyson, I'm laying out the argument form, right? Because that will render the argument as a deductive argument. Because everything that we have to do, mind you, we spell out our domain of discourse set, which means everything we are doing must come from there, which makes it deductive. So all our analysis must be based on the set we build. Now, the serpent said, you shall not surely die, which will be the conclusion. What are the premises here? So God knows that in the day you eat of this, right? 1, your eyes shall be opened. Premise number 1. 2, you shall be as gods. Premise number 2. 3, you shall know good. Premise number 3. 4, you shall know evil. Premise number 4. Therefore, you shall not die. Check it out. Check it out. Again, don't forget, the author has described this serpent as a subtle beast. Right? All of a sudden, he introduces gulls into the picture. Now, Dr. Boyson, when we come full-throated into the discussion of actual arguments, we will learn the difference between deductive argument and inductive argument. But let me give us a sneak peek. with deductive argument, the premises guarantee the truth of the conclusion. Which means deductive arguments are truth preserving. The second thing about deductive argument is that they are called non-ampliative, which means the conclusion does not introduce any new element that cannot already be found in the premises. Are we getting the picture clear? So when we set up our domain of discourse, we realized that there were no gods in. We realized that there was nothing called your eyes shall be opened. Inductive argument is the type of argument where the conclusion can contain additional facts which cannot be found in the premises. So we call inductive arguments ampliative. That means they amplify. So let's look at what is happening and what the author is trying to teach us here. God's commandment was deductive in nature. The serpent was now answering in an inductive form. Already something is wrong with the picture, which means you are going to get facts which are not contained in the premises. And therefore, the whole idea of inductive argument is to just make what we call a calculated leap or take a calculated risk, but it doesn't guarantee truth. Are we getting the picture? So we are learning something about this interesting text. When the author calls the serpent subtle, the author is now giving us what he meant by that term.
Yes, the quality, the actual person the serpent is.
So this is what we call implicit. Everything, the author doesn't come out to give us everything bang, 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 straight. But he's painting a picture of whatever he said. You get me? So the way this text is structured is the author's way of painting subtlety on the part.
Nisa, but let me ask you a quick question. Yeah. What if the author has started that statement by saying, now the serpent was one of the beasts in the field which God had made?
It wouldn't have changed anything, but we still could make a determination of its intellectual capabilities based on its utterances or pronouncements.
By introducing the subtlety, the author is telling us how cunning, how con man or con of a man, the serpent at least. So we know who the person is. And that is why I think later in the scripture, Jesus will say, do not be, do not be ignorant of the devil's devices.
Yes. So again, if you look at the 5 narrative modes I mentioned earlier, the author giving us this information is what we call exposition. The author has given us what it is already. So the author puts us in the know, and by that, he alerts us to be careful as to what is to follow. These are writing techniques. You getting me?
Uncle Max,
yeah, go ahead.
You want to come in? I mean, feel free to come in, Uncle Max.
No, I'm good. I think Pastor Akrong is doing a fantastic job. So I'm learning.
Okay. Unless you just want to sit down for Nisaban to bully me, but that's fine.
I'm not bullying. I'm just trying to.
He's bamboozling me.
They have the arguments, and like he said, me, I don't want trouble. So
know
You
what
see,
you're
Uncle Max is revenging. Last week I said I want to stay in my
I'm
lane.
just killing my name. I'm just killing my name.
Okay, I hear you guys.
Yeah. So, Dr. Boison, again, I mean, it's like we are dealing with the Bible, but we are learning a lot of things, right?
That's true. That's true.
Appreciating text and
That is true.
how serious the act and craft of writing can be, and why diligence on our part will take us far, which means we must also learn to read with the mind of a writer.
I like that.
Right? So here is the author painting the picture of what subtlety is and how the serpent displayed that gift or that call it property called subtlety.
Talent.
You getting me? Now we see direct contradiction. You shall not surely die. Then introduces elements that are not found in the domain of discourse sets we created. That immediately takes you from deductive argument to inductive argument. Very subtle. Very, very subtle. But Dr. Boison, let's land here for today's session. He said, for God knows. What presumption is this?
Thinking for God.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. What sort of presumption is this?
So the serpent knew some things about God that the children of God, Eve and Adam, didn't know.
Well,
the assumption.
That is the picture the serpent is presenting. But again, Dr. Boison, this is the interesting thing. The author took the trouble to tell us the serpent was at least a created being. So the name serpent, definition of the name, serpent is a French word for snake. Why did the author choose serpent and not snake? Serpent actually means very winding or crooked. So again, you see how interesting, giving us some ideas, right? The serpent doesn't come straight, right? He throws feelers here and there to throw you off, and then lands his blows.
Yeah, because the lady didn't put up any resistance. She was just, waiting to be, coaxed or wooed. That's why they say women like the ears, the tickling. They like to be wooed. So the serpent said, let me go and woo. Let me go and wrap this chick. Let me wrap her and let her be bamboozled and just have my way. Because the lady was ready to listen more. Okay, serpent, tell me more. Tell us what God hasn't told us. You seem to know more. So tell us. Maybe my husband even didn't tell me. So you have the feeler that we don't have. Tell us more. And he cornered her eventually.
But the question is, if it was an animal, it was Adam that named it. now get where this text is going. Now you understand why the author actually made Adam not to talk. If the name was serpent, who gave that name serpent? That's to tell you Adam knew this creature very well. Now, that takes us to another domain. What are we therefore dealing with? This is where the power of the Bible, and as I always say, the Bible is not only a spiritual book, but a mind training tool. You getting me? This is writing with the most sophisticated finesse. Okay, let's land and then we'll be for the day. But the devil says, for God knows that in the day you eat of this, you eat thereof. I'll get you, Dr. Boison. Look at what the serpent said. He didn't say in the day you eat of the fruit, as Eve has said. he said, in the day you eat thereof. Thereof can refer to tree or
Anything, yes.
the fruits. And don't forget, Dr. Marx has already made us to understand that there were at least, if any tree was in the middle of the garden that we are explicitly made aware of, it was the tree of life. And possibly the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And it was the tree of the knowledge of good and evil that God had asked them not to eat. However, when Eve was talking, she made reference to location, the tree that was in the midst of the garden. Even if those two trees were in the midst of the garden, which one was he talking about? Again, you see an author trying to paint a picture that Eve's problem was not being the problem of lack of specificity. Whereas the devil was shooting intentionally off base and then shooting directly when it matters. And that, as a result, was throwing Eve off every step of the way. And so we are getting to learn how we can actually fall prey to very interesting con men.
Con men, tell us.
Are you getting me? This is battle of wits, for heaven's sake. Then he said, your eyes shall be opened. What does that mean? What does that mean, Dr. Boison? Get the picture. God had already said one of the trees that he made to grow out of the ground was what? The trees that were pleasant to the
eyes.
Sight. He didn't stop there. He created, he also made to grow out of the ground the tree of the knowledge of good and the tree of the knowledge of evil. Right? What does your eyes being opened mean? Do we find it in the set we call our domain of discourse? No. You see how all of a sudden, so somebody will say, if you look at Eve's ultimate answer, the reason she gave for eating, which I'll stop here. So she said in verse 6, and when the woman saw that the tree was good for food and that it was pleasant to the eyes, get what the text is saying. It wasn't pleasant to the sight. It was pleasant to the eyes. Again, is there a difference between eyes and sight?
Sight and sound.
You see,
wow.
I mean, again, there is. There is. So what God said should characterize the tree, Eve saw something different. And can you see something different than God had said it is? So, Dr. Boison, we can stop here. You see, all of a sudden, this test is more than anything maybe we've encountered.
Wow. You can have eyes and not have vision. And you can have vision but not sight or eyes. Uncle Max, take us home.
In Ireland, where I lived for some time, and these are pretty natural and spiritually inclined people by and large. They talk about people who have the sight. And by that, they mean people who have what some now call higher sense perception. So they are able to see things that are in the spirit realm. Not just so you know, we tree and we see the trunk and the leaves and branches and so on. They will look at the same tree and they will see the energy fields surrounding the tree. They may see the past of the tree. They may see spirits that are in the tree, and so on. This is what is referred to as the sight. Yeah. But many cultures make a distinction between seeing the physical and seeing with the
Spiritual eye.
the spiritual eye. Exactly. Exactly. And so when we encounter these differences in the text of the Bible, seeing with the eyes versus seeing with the sight, we have to be aware it's not accidental. And we are being told something that we should be sensitive to.
Mm. Mm.
Let me give you an example. It's in Genesis, I think, chapter 21. When Abraham had asked Hagar and her son Ishmael, literally, he had thrown them out of his house because of the wife or satisfy Sarah. The Bible said as they were going, they ran out of water. And Hagar left the son under a tree. And then she went and sat somewhere and started crying. And then the Bible said an angel appeared and asked her, why are you crying? And the angel said, the cries of that child have reached the ears of heaven. Whoa, how loud can that child cry? You get him? Very powerful language. But that's not the so. Then the Bible said her eyes were opened and she saw a well.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
So earlier on, she didn't see anything.
She didn't see anything. So what sort of eyes did she get when the angels, her eyes were open? What sort of eyes did she have before it was open?
Maybe he gave me a piece of tree or fruit to eat.
Yeah, well, these are some of the, again,
the eyes were open.
the language pieces in the Bible that can force you to start thinking differently.
Wow.
So here again, we come to Genesis. God said, tree pleasant to the sight. Eve said, the author is saying, Eve saw trees or a tree that was pleasant to the eye, not pleasant to the sight. Very interesting. And then said, the devil said, your eyes shall be opened. You shall be as gods, knowing good and evil. Again, let me land. God said, the day you eat, you will die. The devil saying, the serpent saying, you shall not die. You shall become as gods. You shall know good and evil. Does it mean that the gods are beings that know the difference between good and evil, and because of that, they don't die? Because that's the argument the devil and the serpent presented. Dr. Boison, I can land here. Next week, we'll continue.
All right, the flight has just landed. We have just landed at Kotoka International Airport, according to Nisaba. And it reminds me about this sighting. I know there's one blind guy in Ghana. I don't want to mention names here, but he said, although he cannot see physically, it looks as if all the senses that should have enabled him to see have now been gathered in his brain. So this guy can, I hear he's a historian. He can, I've listened to him a few times. He can give you dates. Just give him an event in Ghana and he will pop up the date. Or give him the date and he will tell you whether it was a Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday. So according to him, although he cannot see physically, all the senses have been gathered in his brain. So the mind is really, really sharp. Anyway, on that note, we end for tonight's discussion. Thank you very much, as usual, my co-host, Nisaba and Uncle Max. Thank you for another splendid discussion. Anytime we think we are out of material, here just before we end, we have another information. You can tell that just when we were ending, another topic just crept up that we can even start from there. So this topic is very, very long, huge, and very broad. We didn't even exhaust the serpent's proposition. We were talking about deductive and inductive argument and reflection, but there's still more. We haven't even come to God's proposition, what God actually told Eve and Adam. And Uncle Max and Nisama, please, I still want my answer. Where was Adam specifically when this was going on? I know Uncle Max was
He was playing chess, Kenny.
Well, don't use my name, please. They stop that game. Please don't use my name for anything.
He was playing chess, Kenny.
Okay, whatever Kelly Adam was playing, that's fine. He said it right. That is why we are all here. I mean, he didn't play the right.
You may well have been hiding behind the tree of the knowledge of.
He was eavesdropping and looking on whether something, but then he
you asked me a question. I said he was playing chess, Kelly.
Okay, well, you said he named the animal, so he didn't want to get into it. He didn't want to be concerned because he was just looking on. But that looking on, sometimes you have to look on well. We said, oh, I don't want to listen to what my wife is having. But sometimes you need to hear. If he had gone ahead and listened very well, this thing would not have happened. Anyway, let's bring our study to a close to right now. Thank you very much. I will meet you again next week, beloved. Please keep sharing the video. Go to YouTube, go to Facebook, type in era 1. All our clips will show up. The one that you missed, please go and listen. These are very, very good materials that I don't think even the Bible school is teaching, because this is like a 10 credit hour course or something. And these gentlemen are the right people to help us do this, guys. So thank you very much, Nis Abanko Max. Please go get some rest. And I will catch you again here, same place, same time next week. Have a blessed evening and stay blessed. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
All right, bye.
Hello, beautiful people of Ghana. This is Vardon Specialist Hospital. We are so excited to announce to our people Ghana that we are finally opened and we are accepting patients. At Boison Specialist Hospital, our extraordinary physicians and nurses are here to provide a high-quality medical service to our extraordinary patients. Our services include primary care services, maternal, neonatal, and pediatric services. We also have an in-house pharmacy. We have X-ray and laboratory services available to you. Come to us for all your healthcare needs, and you will be happy you did, because we believe the health is wealth. Thank you, and stay blessed.
This is not your typical green tea. The Major Herbal Tea by Glucose Care International is a nutritious drink and a natural blood glucose reducer. Gymnema plant, the active ingredients in the Flamingo Herbal Tea, suppresses the absorption of carbohydrate ingested from your diet. The green tea content in the Flamingo Herbal Tea promotes rejuvenation of dead cells, detoxification of your system, stimulates the pancreas to release insulin, and improves metabolism. Drinking 1 sachet of Flamingo Herbal Tea after meals prevents the rise in blood sugar levels, suppresses appetite, and improves bowel movements. Drinking Flamingo Herbal Tea regularly after meals can also prevent type 2 diabetes. We encourage you to drink Flamingo Herbal Tea 3 times in a day, coupled with mild exercises to maximize its benefits. Flamingo Herbal Tea has been approved by the FDA. Toxicity test conducted by SGS, so it is safe and non-toxic. A product of Singapore. With Flamingo Herbal Tea, your peace of mind is guaranteed. Call our shop now on 0245 810 623 and set your path to good health.
Aden urefiana, say to me manya any, of me manya any.